Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about the light independent reaction, the last part of photosynthesis that we're going to cover, and it's the part that allows the CO2 to come in and the ultimate product from photosynthesis to be made, glucose, but more specifically a hexose sugar. So just a quick revision for the light independent reaction. We've got what we have going in is 6 CO2 molecules plus 6 water molecules plus energy which is in the form of light, and that gives us our glucose molecule and our oxygen. Okay, this is the formula you need to know for the light independent reaction. For photosynthesis. And the photosynthesis in two main stages: the light dependent reaction and the light independent reaction. So in one of my previous videos I draw something like this. So this is a very quick attempt of a chloroplast. Hopefully you remember these things I'm drawing are the thylakoids to make the grana. And what you've got to remember is what we have going in to the light dependent to photosynthesis is we have water going in and we have light going in, and that spits out our O2. All this takes place in the thylakoid membrane, and it is known as the light dependent reaction because it requires light. What is travelled over from the light dependent reaction is ATP, so that's produced over here, and which carries energy, and reduced NADP. And these all go over, so reduced NADP is going to carry hydrogen ions, which are protons, and ATP carries energy, and they're going to go over to the light independent reaction, this bit, which is known as the Calvin cycle. I'll that as CC. And what the Calvin cycle uses, so far, in fact, I'll cross it off. So far, we've seen the oxygen, and we've seen the water, and we've seen the light going. We haven't seen any CO2, but what we have seen is the oxygen leaving the plant. So now we've only got CO2 and the sugar to be made. So in the light dependent reaction, you're going to get your CO2 going in, and you're going to get your product, your other product, which is the glucose. So in this video, what I'll be talking about, you'll be seeing the CO2 being added, and you'll be seeing the glucose being produced, all happening in the Calvin cycle. But these two products, ATP and reduced NADP, will also appear. Remember, they come from the stage before. So to save a little bit of time and a bit of neatness, I've pre-made a circle. So remember, this is a cycle, and it can be quite tricky. You'll see two versions of this cycle. They're both right, but there's one that you normally see that shows the steps, and then a more accurate version. I'll explain that as I go on. The trick of the Calvin cycle is to make sure you count the carbons. So what we have, first of all, and you won't know where this has come from yet, but you will towards the end of the video because it's a cycle, is we have a molecule called ribulose bisphosphate. And that's abbreviated to a capital R, a lowercase u, capital B and P. Now this is a molecule, so it's here, and it has 5 carbons. And I'll write 5C here, but I'm gonna draw 5 little squares to demonstrate or to visualize it as 5 carbons. So there's 5 carbons there. This is already in the cycle, and you'll see where it comes from. Now what happens is, as I said before, is CO2 is added. So our CO2 molecule, and we're saying 1 CO2, so 1 carbon's coming in. And it comes into the cycle and it combines with this 5 carbon molecule via an enzyme, which is a protein called ribisco. Ribisco is the most abundant protein on the planet because it's in every leaf and there's a lot of trees. Okay, ribisco. So this is an enzyme which binds these two together. It catalyzes this reaction. What that gives you is a 6 carbon molecule which quickly gets broken down into 2 3 carbon molecules. So we've got 6 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What happens is they join together, makes a 6 carbon molecule, and then it's broken down into 2 3 carbon molecules, like so. And we say this is 2 times GP. So each one's a GP, and GP stands for glycerate 3-phosphate. So we've still got a 6 carbons, but they're in 2 separate molecules now called glycerate 3-phosphate. So that's transformed that. So you've got 5, 1 makes 6. What happens then is some of the products from the light-dependent reaction come in. Specifically 2 ATP, so 2 lots of ATP energy is used. Once that happens, that little P gets removed and releases a tiny amount of energy, and that'll leave you with 2 ADP plus the phosphate that's been removed, and that'll go back to the light dependent reaction to be recycled back into ATP. So 2 ATP comes in, but also we have 2 times reduced NADP, which means once that's used and it's dropped off its hydrogen ions or the protons, we'll have just NADP. These two little reactions transform this glycerate 3-phosphate molecule into, I'll write it in here, triose phosphate, which is known as TP. So now we've got 2 times TP, and that is also 2 3 carbon molecules. Now what will happen is this TP will then move outwards and be transformed into the hexose sugar. Now glucose, even though we say glucose is the product, it's not the direct product of the Calvin cycle. Hexose sugar is, and then in a few other steps which aren't covered in photosynthesis, it's then turned to mainly glucose, but it can also be turned to cellulose. So this produces the hexose sugar, which will go on to be, hexose sugar, which will go on to be glucose. Now this is the confusing bit. We've had 1 CO2 come in, and we've had our 6 carbon molecule ended. But remember at the start we had a 5 carbon molecule, and it has to cycle. So what happens is only one of these carbons stays, and the other 5 carbons carry on up to here. So actually what's happened is we've dropped one carbon off. Another ATP comes in, but only one, which will make sure that we end up with ADP plus P. And then we're back with the ribulose bisphosphate. But it's only dropped one carbon off. This is a very common cycle you'll see written like this, but it doesn't tell the whole story, because all we've transferred is this one CO2 carbon to the end, which would make part of triose phosphate, but we had to recycle 5 of them carbons to go back in. So hopefully you've worked this out already. For this cycle to go round, to make a hexose sugar, which is a 6 carbon, this cycle needs to go round 6 times. Because you'll need 6 carbons to go in for 6 carbons to come out. So you'll see an image like this, but you'll also, here's another one I prepared earlier, see the same image, but done more accurately, where all these numbers are timed by the number 6. So I'll do that as well. So what we'll have is I'll just use the abbreviations. We'll have times 6 RUBP. We will also have, I can't remember what colour it is in, yes I can. We'll have our 6 CO2 molecules coming in. We'll have, before we had 2 times 3, 2 GP molecules, so we times 2 by 6, which means that we're going to have 12 GP. We had, again, 2 times ATP, so this time we're going to have 12 ATP coming in and 12 ADP plus P coming out, and the same will apply for the reduced NADP. We'll end up with 12 NADP. You'll end up with 12 times TP, and then you'll end up with 6 ATP going in here, because there was only one before, and 6 ADP plus P, which will add up to, I'll do these in a blue colour for carbons, so we'll actually have 6 times 5 carbons in this stage, which is 30 carbons overall. You're also going to have 6 times 1 here, 6 times 1, which is 6. You're going to have 2 sets of 3, so 12 sets of 3, sorry, which will mean 36 carbons here. You will have your same again here, 36 carbons, because you've got the same sum. And then you'll go back in with this 30 carbon number, but you had 30 carbons here and you had 6 carbons here, and that's the magic number. We've lost 6 between here and here, which means that 6 carbon molecule has left the Calvin cycle, and that is now our hexose sugar, which will most likely become the glucose. It's quite a lot to take in, but if you can picture that in your mind and then times all these numbers by 12, with the understanding that this 5 has to be there to start the cycle off again, and you end up with 6 here. So you only get one TP part, I suppose, per one CO2 per one CO2. So that means this needs to go around 6 times to get your hexose sugar, and that would complete all the photosynthesis. We now have seen our CO2 go in, and we've seen our sugar being produced. I hope that's clear, and if any of that has gone a little bit over your head, be sure to watch the overview of photosynthesis and the light dependent reaction. Thank you.